Adrienne, and welcome to the podcast. We're happy to have you. Can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure, my name is Adrienne Waller. I also go by the worldwide educator. I'm from Metro Detroit. I've lived in 7 countries, and I'm not sure what else you want to know, but I'll stop there.
Well, thank you. Thank you for introducing yourself. So, Adrienne, first question. Are you a certified teacher?
I am a certified teacher and a certified administrator.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about your certification?
So I initially got certified in Illinois, and I went actually through an alternative certification program, stayed, and then got my full license, moved back to Metro Detroit, worked in Detroit, and also got my Michigan certification. I started before I went abroad, my administrator certification, and then I was like, oh, I'm leaving the country. So I stopped that kind of midway, and then the pandemic happened and it allowed me to finish my admin certification and credentials abroad. So now I am certified both as a teacher and an administrator
Look
in
at you.
Illinois and Michigan.
Very, very nice. So, tell us a little bit about your teaching experience in the US.
So, out of college, I actually did AmeriCorps where I worked with DC public schools around like parental involvement, a program called Literacy Through Photography, and then a partnership with the museums that did like summer Smithsonian trips. So did that and then realized like, hey, I really should be in a classroom. And so I went through Chicago Teaching Fellows. I also got into New York Teaching Fellows, but took Chicago Teaching Fellows, and that's how I became an educator, taught in Chicago for 7 years in Chicago public schools. After I lost my dad, I moved back to Michigan and then worked at a charter school in New Center area of Detroit. And then after 2 years of doing that, I was like, yeah, I think I want to take my talents, across the pond. And so that's what I did.
Well, I am sorry to hear about your dad, but it definitely does sound like you have a wealth of knowledge and experience, Adrian. A wealth of knowledge and experience. So tell us what made you decide to relocate.
Abroad. So
Yes.
essentially, I was in my ninth year teaching, and I was kind of burnt out on US education. I'd been a part of the Chicago's teacher strike, which was really eye-opening to some of like the negative viewpoints on educators that I had never really seen before. Moved
Okay.
back to Detroit, was working at a charter school, and I just felt tired. And I felt like, I remember thinking maybe teaching really isn't for me. I felt like I was in a rat race. I would save up all year to go on one little trip,
Hmm.
not little, but one trip with my mom. And then that was it. The rest was rat racing again. And I just was like, there's got to be something else. So I was actually at a leadership team meeting with my school in Detroit, and it was like around, right before Christmas time. So it was like one of those dinners, and it was a long table, and a coworker started was talking about what the other end of the table was talking about. And I was like, are people talking about teachers teaching in different countries? And she was like, yeah, I did it. I met my husband and we got married, and blah, blah, blah. I was like, wait, what? And
Okay.
it just piqued the interest that I was like, well, let me go. Let me try this. I'm going to go off to the Middle East. I don't know why I picked the Middle East, probably because of talking to her. And I was just like, if it doesn't work there, then maybe teaching really isn't for me.
Okay. Wow. Wow. That's a really nice way to roll into relocating and teaching abroad. So tell me a little bit about the process.
So there's now, like, having done it a few times, I realize way more about it. When I first did it, I just got onto one of the free recruiting sites and used that. Now I know about a ton of different ways to go abroad. I actually host a series on my Instagram called the Recruiter Roundup, where I interview the various recruiters in international education to kind of talk about what credentials people need. And there are different ones depending on what you're trying to do. Some people go abroad to teach and don't have any, teaching certificate. And then some people have just a TESOL, TEFL certificate, and then some are like fully certified educators in their home country. And depending on where your home country is, that can be different as well. But essentially, the biggest thing is either if you're going to completely do it on your own, finding and reaching out to schools, but there are several schools that don't always really do the contact us on your own. Most schools, most reputable schools, even if they do that, will also be using recruiters. And there's several recruiters in the international space, but there's a smaller number that I would call like reputable, reliable, that you can kind of count on, that have a plethora of schools, so that as you're going through the process, you really have options in front of you. So
nice. You definitely have to share your information with us at the end of the podcast, because I'm sure there's so many of our listeners that would be really, really helped out by what you have to offer. Thank you so much. Now, a little bit of a random question. Are you an introvert or an extrovert, Adrienne?
Most people would qualify me as an extrovert, but I feel like extroverts have to recharge their batteries too. And so I definitely have introvert periods and times.
I hear that. Okay. So going a little bit into your travel experience, how do you think travel has changed you over the past few years?
Whew. Travel and then living abroad specifically has really made me much more patient. That's probably the biggest change, particularly living abroad, not just traveling. Traveling, I think, is more open me to be more understanding, empathetic, and realizing how different the world is, but really how the same it is at the same time. It's a very odd thing. I feel like the more I travel, the more I see the same and the more I see different. Is hard to kind of describe. But living abroad has definitely taught me a new sense of patience. There's no way you can live abroad for multiple years and not learn how to be patient, understanding, and realize that there are so many other ways to do things than the way you're probably used to from back home.
Love it. Love it. Now, probably a bit of a controversial question here, but how is teaching abroad different than teaching in the US?
Oh, there's quite a few ways. And then some of that also depends on the country, the school, and the time that you do it. I think one of the major differences would be the fact that, how do I say this? So one of the biggest differences in teaching abroad than in the United States specifically is that one is special education. That's probably the biggest difference, is that the U.S. has had IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, since 1984, if I'm not mistaken. That's a really long time. That's almost 40 years of law. That's millions and millions of people who have been impacted by that law. Some countries still don't have a law that is even a fraction of what our special education law does, which means that there's money that backs up the support. There's a lot of training, there's a lot of information, a lot of expertise. Testing is free at public schools. OT and speech are included. And those are things that you don't readily see abroad in the same way. Some schools have more, some don't even have special education as an offer at their international school. Some countries, you'll see that the communities don't really believe in it, or it's kind of hush hush, like kids are getting it, but it's not called that, it's called something else. So that's probably one of the biggest ones. Another would be kind of on the same vein, is the US does a lot of like teacher evaluation in a way that doesn't feel like supportive of teachers. It feels like, ooh, let's catch you, let's see if you're really doing a good job or not. And international education is very much not like that, both for good and bad. You can go years without being evaluated. Test scores are really meant to evaluate what kids are learning, not how well teachers are teaching. Really to be the basis of really good conversations, and maybe evaluating the school as a whole, and
Mm-hmm.
becomes like a marketing tool, but not to say you, Adrienne, are a terrible teacher because your map scores say this, or your this standardized test says that. So that's another big difference. And then the one that I think is probably one of the most positive is when you work in an international school, you're working with people from so many different places with so many different experiences. So just on my leadership team alone, so there's me, my principal, and then like the person who's like does the same job as me but for older students. And I'm from the United States, my principal's from Canada, and the other gentleman is from the UK. I've worked in China, Qatar, Kuwait. My principal's worked in Mexico, India, and then the other gentleman has worked in the Philippines and the Netherlands. So each of us is from somewhere different. Each of us has a different set of experiences teaching internationally or leading internationally. And then we come together and we're learning from all of those experiences. And that's just the representation of like 9 or 10 countries just in 3 people, in experiences. That doesn't include going through each of my teams, within there. That doesn't include the grade levels, our special education team, specialists, any of that. So you learn so much, you find out so many different ways to do education. And it's a constant learning process while you're there, where people are learning from you and what you do and how you do it, while you're learning from others and what they do and how they do it.
Which seems like a very, very beautiful experience. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Now, leading into my next question, which kind of piggybacks off of this one, would you ever go back to teaching in the US?
I'm not against it. It's not something I'm radically trying to make happen either. I'm very happy with the life I created. And mind you, when I first went abroad, it was kind of like a let's see what happens type of thing. It was not meant to be the journey I've been on. It was like, oh, we'll see. And if it doesn't work, I'll come back. People used to be like, well, what happens if you don't like it? I'm like, if there's a plane to get me there, there's a plane to get me back. And so that was always kind of my theory. I was actually dating somebody at the time and kind of was just going to do it to kind of make some better money, clear some debt in a year, and then, come back and we get married and ride off into the sunset. That clearly did not happen. But I'm not against it. I keep my credentials in the United States active so that if I do want to come home, I always have that as an option, but it's definitely not one I'm exploring currently.
Okay. I love the fact that you're keeping your options open, though. I think that's really important. Don't just let your credentials lapse, because we know with certification you have to make sure you keep up with it. So I love the fact that you're keeping up just in case, right? All right.
That, and also just as a note, internationally, sometimes if your credentials aren't active, the school won't actually be able to hire you. So US credentials are kind of gold standard in almost any country you're trying to go to. If you have active US credentials, you'll be able to get licenses and visas in the country that you want to go to. So it's also very helpful for when you're looking for jobs abroad as well.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, Adrienne. Now, name 2 challenges you've faced since teaching abroad.
The first one is just the culture shock, the adjustment to things are different and they don't work the way you do. So you're probably used to. So I remember living in Qatar. You would go to a government like entity and say you're trying to get your driver's license. I don't know. It doesn't matter what it is. Just pick something. And then you go there and they say, okay, you need document A, B, and C. And you go, well, on the website, it told me I need A, B, and F. They're like, yes, but we need A, B, and C. And we can't, process anything until you have it. So you come back with A, B, and C, and you talk to somebody and they go, oh, we need A, C, F, and G. Well, where'd G come from? Okay. Mind you, at the same time, the person 2 stalls down from you who came with you with the same A, B, and C gets everything processed and finished. And it's not any discrimination. It's literally just how they do it. And then so I learned very quickly. I just kept a binder with everything. I would talk to people. I would look at what the website said, but realize that could be out of date or just not what they feel like doing that day. And I would bring all the different documents. So it didn't matter what you told me I needed. I kind of pulled it out. It could be something that wasn't even related. It was something that they asked me for when I was trying to set up my cable. And I would still bring that document with me. And I
Wow.
just kept everything in a binder so that I didn't have to make 6 trips to the ministry to try and figure out who needs what on what day. That was probably one of the biggest, and that's just a small example, but just doing things differently and adjusting to that. That's one. The other is adjusting to not being able to as readily attend, connect, and be with the people you've known for your whole life. When you start missing
Hmm.
weddings and baby showers that you really want to go to, but you're 14 hours away by flight, or you're $1,000 away by cost of the flight, or you're a teacher. So, teachers don't really get time off. You kind of get the time off that's given to you. You might get like 2 personal days and that's it. So adjusting to not being at things, if you're on the other side of the world, the time difference and trying to connect with people can be really difficult. To be honest, the pandemic was really helpful with that because I think it expanded how people connect. Where before the pandemic, I had to have like 8 different apps. I was like, what do you use? Oh, you're a Mac user? I have FaceTime. Oh, you're a Google user? I have Hangouts. Oh, you don't use any of those? You want a Marco Polo? I have that. Like it was literally every app that whatever app somebody said they use, I was open to. Since the pandemic and people had to start to find ways to connect digitally, I feel like I really don't need nearly as many. And most people really have one or, like there's just a couple that I really use that allow me to stay connected with people. I've also just accepted the people I've lost along the way where I don't talk to like I did before I left the United States.
Which is tough. It's tough, right? It's not a good space to feel that you've lost connection because you've gone on this amazing journey. But sometimes I think these are things that people have to be mindful of that they will face or they might face when they decide to go teach abroad or relocate abroad. So I think you've handled it really, really well. Um, I have one final question for you, Adrian. Now, what advice would you give to young Adrian?
Oof. It was just, I didn't even know about this. So I wish that I had just explored what was out there. So it's not, I don't know if it's advice. I just wish I could have somebody bump into me a little bit sooner to let me know about this amazing opportunity. Um, but I think everything happens in due course. I think Adrienne, who was contemplating and thinking about going, I would just tell her, do it. It's worth it. It's going to change your life for the better. You're going to grow personally. You're going to grow professionally. You're going to grow just as a human being. Like I tell everyone, I'm a better human being for having gone abroad. And so I would just tell myself, do it. If you're on the fence, don't be, jump.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think that's great advice. I think that's advice we would all want to have, right? Now, Adrian, thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate you stopping by. Loves teaching, will travel. Can you let us know where we can find you on social media, websites, everything? I'll also be sharing your information in the show notes, but just so the listeners can hear it firsthand.
No problem. The best way to find me, which connects to all of my other ways of getting in contact with me, is through my website, which is worldwideeducator.org. You can also find me on Instagram at worldwideeducator.org. I'm on Twitter at worldwideeducator, but it's with an 8 where it sounds like an 8. I'm on LinkedIn, Adrienne Waller, Facebook, Worldwide Educator. For the most part, if you type in Worldwide Educator in Google, I'm really proud of myself that I am the number one search that will pop up, result that'll pop up for you. So, you can get a hold of me through any of those. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much again, Adrienne. And I hope we can definitely spend some time chatting again, when we both have some time to connect, because I think you have so much to share and it's really important to get that information out to the audience. So thanks again for coming on, and everyone have a great day.